Welcome to the Level Up Business Podcast. I am excited for today's conversation with my friend Dave Hime. Oh my goodness. I don't even really know where to begin, Dave, because we there's so many different ways this conversation could unfold. And like many of these conversations, I have a lot of questions. I believe within every question is a quest to guide others on a journey to elevate and level up. And, the work that you're doing to help people reveal their conscious signature is very intriguing. It is very unique. And before we get too far there, I want to roll back, just start off like we always do on a positive perspective. What is going well? What is good in your world personally and or professionally? It's your pick to get started.
Great. Well, the best thing that's going on in my world right now, both personally and professionally, is sitting here with you, my friend JR. We have only met a couple of times, but the work that you're doing is so aligned with where I see the world going, and it's just an honor to be here, and I'm ready to rock and roll and have a great time today.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that word alignment, because I can tell you for the longest time, as an entrepreneur, as a father, as a husband, I probably was living out of alignment, and that created a lot of pain. That created a lot of chaos. And it's been through this journey to launch Level Up Business that I have felt the most aligned that I have probably ever felt as a human being, as a being for that matter. And I'm curious. You mentioned where the world is heading. Before we talk about where the world is heading, I'm going to roll back for context to get some more perspective for those watching and listening with your own entrepreneurial journey, because there has been a shift in your own story, and what happened? What transpired for you to experience your own shift to elevate and level up as a person, as an entrepreneur?
What happened was, and in my early 60s, so I'm 67 now, I realized that the way I had been taught that success was going to work, which is get a college degree, get a good job, get taken care of. That was my father's experience, but certainly has not been the experience of many of my peers. And I realized in my early 60s that if I'd spent 45 years trying to make that formula work, and during that period, I kept being introduced to things outside that formula, more transformational kinds of opportunities, and had turned my back on those opportunities in favor of sticking with the supposedly tried and true formula. But what I realized again, maybe about 5 years ago actually it was about 4 years ago, is that if I wanted to live a life that had meaning, live a life that really had purpose, live a life that was really going to give me a feeling of success beyond anything that you could look at in your bank account, that I had to start over. And that was scary. I had to go to a place where I was willing to say to myself, everything I know could be wrong. So how do I go from there to learning what is actually true for me? And that's what led me to the work I do now. That's what led me to create the Gentle Mastery Method, out of which we have legacy activation work and then this consciousness signature, which you just hit the nail on the head talking about your life being full of upheaval and full of learnings. And, you saw in what I sent you about your consciousness signature that that's how your life was designed to be up until a particular age. And then you get to that particular age for you, and you start to be able to understand and contemplate those experiences and bring them into something new.
Which is super fascinating because and we're probably going to jump around a little bit with this, and I do want to come back to your story, your wisdom, your narrative. But one of the things that you mentioned was this transition from, like, I think you mentioned like my 30s and then moving into my 40s. I'm 44 now. But if I go back a couple of years, I think that's when I started to feel this. So that would have been 2021. And that was around the time I got the download for Level Up Business,
Yeah.
June of 2021. And it was also around the time that I started early thinking around writing my second book, Banking on Change. And there you go. Yes. But I think what was the most wild part of it was you talked about the 40s as this like rooftop experience, but you used a different narrative or analogy, which was the mountaintop. And in Banking on Change, it's the entire everything is framed around the mountaintop. So I'm like, okay, this is just super interesting for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you brought me the mountaintop, actually. I hadn't started banking on change.
Uh-huh.
But everybody who uses some of the systems that I use, when they talk about that 30 to 50 age range for the people with your particular energy type, they use the rooftop. But it occurred to me as I was developing your consciousness signature report to give to you that for you, it really is the mountaintop, that you have gotten to the top of a mountain, not in order to lord it over everybody else, but in order to see what your past has brought into your creation, into your reality, and begin to understand, because it doesn't really happen for you until you hit your 50s, how it is that you will take on a new type of leadership with this amazing group of level up leaders that you're currently creating, this network. And it was beautiful to find that in your consciousness signature.
Well, this is where I want to go back to your wisdom. And the reason being is when I think about this age of artificial intelligence, I'm more interested in the authentic intelligence of others and how tapping into the infinite intelligence we can bring in infinite possibilities. So your unique wisdom is two parts. It is your unique perspective that is further multiplied by your unique method. And you mentioned before the gentle mastery method. You also have the conscious signature. What inspired you? What was the perspective, your unique perspective, your live, learn, shared experience? We're starting to tap into that a little bit. I want to come back to the perspective, and then we'll loop back around to the method here for you. But where was the perspective gained to develop the gentle mastery method and the conscious signature? And what are the elements of these?
Well, I pull from multiple systems, but where I got to those systems is through what I was talking about 4 years ago, January of 2022, when I woke up and said, I'm going to have to reassess my entire life to see where it is I'm going next. And that it may simply be that everything that I thought I knew isn't true for me for one reason or another. And so what I started to search for, when you're in that place, you're in a place where you feel like you don't have any kind of a safety net, like you are just flying blind. And I started to search for something that could help me understand myself in a way that I'd never understood myself before. And the system that first came up into my awareness is one called human design. And when I looked into my own human design, what I found was affirmation and verification for who I am designed to be in this world and how I am designed to live my life. And almost every single aspect that was brought forward by the human design information that I got about myself, A, was true, felt true, and were aspects of myself that I had been trying to change all of my life. What I thought were my failings were actually my strengths.
Mm.
And that blew my mind when I started to experiment with being in alignment. Again, we'll go back to that word alignment with these energetics that human design started to show me that I'm here to embody. Then what I found happening in my life were experiences, synchronicities, doors opening, um, almost fantasy like dreams that I'd had coming true. And I know that sounds wild, but no matter what the system is that you find when you're in that place where you are looking to understand yourself at a deeper level, on a level of consciousness, on a level that says, yes, I am my physical self, I am my emotional self, I am my mental self, but I'm also something more than that. And when you find the system that aligns with you, that allows you to be fully who you were brought to earth to be, miracles begin to occur. And so that was my path. That was the beginning of my path. And it took me into a few other systems that I've now all pulled together into the consciousness signature work that I do, which is folded inside of the gentle mastery method. The idea quickly of the gentle mastery method is we have enough people out there telling us to get up at 5 a.m., run before the sun comes up, take a cold shower. And ladies and gents, if that works for you, I am all for it. It works for a lot of my clients, actually. It just never worked for me. And when I found my design, when I found my consciousness signature, I understood why. And I understood that my job here on earth is to come from a gentle space, a loving space, one that is both compassionate for others, but also compassionate for self. And that's the essence of what gentle mastery is, because this is not easy work, learning about yourself in this way.
It's super interesting you say it's not easy work to learn about yourself, but I think about a lot of the entrepreneurs that I hang out with. There is this drive to know thyself. That is very different from another business that I had and another vertical, to where there was a lot of fear of even opening up the space to explore the deepest questions of who am I, followed by the second question of why am I here? Um, and so when I work with these entrepreneurs to unlock their wisdom, share their wisdom, amplify their voice, very similar. It's very deep personal work, but it just seems like the entrepreneurial MO is more open to that type of work to begin with. I think about even my own journey. It started with disc, and then it was
Yeah.
Colby, and the work of Kathy Colby, and how we naturally take action and solve problems. And then it was Working Genius. And so it's this continued understanding. And then there's a couple of others that are on my radar, like Prent, for example. You I want to roll back to something, because what you were sharing reminded me of my friend Billy Bloom, who I've had a conversation with on the podcast, and he put a book on my radar. about the surrender experiment, and you talked about that. You shared that with me, and in the video and the loom that you did, and the document that you shared with my conscious signature. You were touching on this yourself about surrender, letting go. Perhaps is a way to frame that. It's just something I'm also listening to and hearing with other entrepreneurs as well. Like once again, it's this idea of the shift.
Right.
There's a shift happening. What's going on? What do you mean by, in your perspective, in your story, to surrender, to let go? Because this was the beginning of your journey from external success to then what you frame as authentic freedom.
Great question. So surrender is going to, I think, look a little bit different for everybody who embraces it. But I think the core here is to first, with a lot of compassion, understand who you really are. And part of that is, like you talked about, through a variety of different tools that can bring you closer to understanding yourself. But there is in a way, there is a ego death or identity death when you go down this road. And that requires you to be able to surrender your existing beliefs about how things should be, or how you should act or be or think. And that requires an immense amount of faith. So, what it always comes back to for me is surrender equals having more faith that whatever energy has brought you here, whatever your belief system is, however it is that you have learned to understand yourself, is there to support you than the fear of walking into the unknown. And I think that's where your entrepreneurial rarefied air group that you're in, yeah, it's the people who are willing to step out into the invisible and trust that they're going to be okay no matter what. That you have to surrender a lot of what the world and life has maybe told you is
Mhm.
true in order to be able to do that.
It's funny, we talk about faith. One of the things when I hear that, I think about faith, it's the substance of things that we hope for, but it's the evidence of things that we've not seen just yet. Um, 2 years ago, I put on what I call my action board.
Mm.
And this is different than a vision board, because vision is one part of the equation. I mean, even if we look at ancient wisdom, it says where there's a vision, the people will perish. And so there's vision, then you have to have the action. That's why we call it the action board. And so as we prepare for another year of this as a family, I do mine, my wife does hers, our 4 kids do theirs, and we put them up on our hallway. And what it does, and we can get into the neuroscience of this a little bit too, because it activates the reticular activating system, the RAS, so it acts as a filter. Because then as we walk by the hallway, we have visually represented what our goals, our ideals, our hopes, our dreams are for the year. And it's fascinating as we close out a year, like, oh my gosh, like, wow, we don't hit everything on that. And some of them will roll over into the next year, but we have definitely made progress in all of these different areas as individuals and as a family. But I remember last year as I was going through this transformation myself, um, probably taking a couple of years too long to have the courage to literally step out of the boat, because that was for me. It was in the upper left hand corner. I had the image visualized of Peter stepping out of the boat and walking on water. And I'm like, I knew that's what I needed to do. But literally, I put that image there, upper left hand corner, saw it every day. But it took until about December 15th last year to make that, to just get out of the boat. And then this year in that same spot, the way that I was feeling to start the year was I'm like underwater drowning. So there was another image of Jesus reaching into the water in his hands to pick me up out of the water. And I'm like, yeah. And I want to come back to this point too. When you talk about faith versus fear, because I think that is, if we think about, let's go back to the mountain analogy. It's like at the bottom, things of the bottom of the mountain, that's where things, and I was talking to my kids about this the other day. We went out to Big Bend about a year ago, National Park, and we went and hiked. And I said, do you remember when we started, where were we? We were at the base. We were at the bottom. And I said, what was there? They said, like a store. I said, yes. And what was in the store? A lot of supplies. And I was like, yeah, because like that's where everyone's just trying to survive. Fear, scarcity, anxiety. And I know you and I are both very familiar with Hawkins' map of consciousness.
Yeah.
And so as you move further up on the mountain, though, as we were climbing, I kept having the kids look back. What's changed? Because that was their point of perspective. Because the higher they climbed, their perspective changed, and they felt the energy shift. A lot of what they felt at the bottom, the higher we got, it felt clear, it felt light. What have you seen through your work and the clients that you have guided to move from perhaps an energy, a consciousness of fear, to a consciousness of faith?
Wow, you've thrown a lot in there. I first want to say the lens, the filter through which we see life is everything. Perspective is everything. So when you talk about having your action boards and having that be the filter for your day every day, there's real power there. And then you mention the boat and Peter, and you mentioned the drowning and Jesus. And I know you know this, but certainly the way I look at these things is you are Peter, you are Jesus. All of these things are aspects of who you are. And in one way or another, that's where I start with all of my clients. All of the people who come to me, they are awake to their consciousness in one way or another. And the way that you get there isn't as important as the fact that you do get there and that you do recognize that the mountain you're about to climb requires a Sherpa, requires somebody who understands the pathways, who understands how to keep you safe during this climb. I have clients who've come to me because they've been so concerned about the world and the way the world is going that literally during the last presidential cycle, they couldn't handle watching the conventions. So this one particular client who I'm referring to, and he won't mind me mentioning him, is so left brain oriented, like so many of us are who are out there striving for survival, that he got as far away from the convention TV that his wife was watching and got on his iPad and started reading Scientific American. And in reading Scientific American, came across an article about the benefits of meditation. And that very day, because his left brain had something that it could go back to and say, well, if Scientific American says it's true, it must be true, it must be beneficial. If what I'm trying to do is find a calm, centered place inside of myself, then I'm going to try this meditation thing. And he got hooked, and that's what opened him to his consciousness. I have another client who is in financial tech who got opened to consciousness through Bitcoin, of all things. So the routes can be whatever those routes are, but once you get there, you are then facing the climb up the mountain. And my job, my whole purpose of being here on the planet, is to be the Sherpa for those people who are ready to go.
Hey, it's JR, and I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for tuning into today's conversation. Before we get back to the show, I have a quick question for you. Are you a visionary entrepreneur who wants to elevate your brand and expand your influence to increase your impact? If this is you, you're the reason we're on a mission to amplify the voices of visionary entrepreneurs by unlocking their wisdom, sharing their stories, publishing their books. So, when you are ready to level up your business and your life, send me a text to 832-240-1922. That's because I want to teach you how to amplify your voice so that your mission and message are seen, known, and heard by those who need your help the most. Now, let's get back to the conversation to continue to learn, to grow, to level up together. I want to roll back to something you said before about the ego death and where your belief systems begin to crumble and fall. That's one of the reasons, like on my shirt, I mean, this is my life's motto now, Memento Mori.
Yeah.
It is remember your death. It is Latin, because I do believe that every day I have to wake up and have a death the day before to become the person that I was called to become, that I was created to become. That's going to mean I got to leave some things behind. And I'm not saying it's always easy. I was even challenged last week with a bigger future. And I felt it in my body. I felt the fear come up. I felt the tightness, the tension, but I had enough awareness at that point to say, hey, I know what's going on. It's going to be okay because you've been here multiple times before. And to your point, this role that you're playing, I am extremely fascinated because I have studied narrative archetype story for, at this point, about 15 years. And a lot of it was because I was doing a lot of keynote speaking about 15 years ago. And I would be at these conferences and I would hear these speakers at the time, because story was the in vogue hot topic. You have to tell a better story. And I was like, that's great. But I was confused myself. Like, what does that actually mean? How do you do that? How do you tell a better story? And so then just the way that I worked, I went down a path and just dove headfirst into it. But coming back to the idea of the helpful, the empathetic guide, the role that you're playing, clients that you're working with, they're the heroes in the story.
Yep.
And I know for a fact that the cave that they're scared to go into, or the mountain that they need to climb, it holds the very treasure that they're seeking. And because you've taken that journey yourself, you're able to help them to avoid the painful pitfalls, the unseen traps that could prevent them from progressing. And it's like with, every story has three characters, really. You've got the hero, you've got the anti-hero. It's like you've got Luke and you've got Darth Vader.
Yep.
But then you've got you, the role that you're playing with the work that you're doing with your clients through your unique methodologies, which is that of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because it's like without the guide, the hero will remain lost and struggle and have the pain. And so you're the Obi-Wan, you're the Gandalf, you're the Mr. Miyagi. It's whatever archetype you want to put to this. But I'm curious, when we think about the unique method that you bring with gentle mastery, the gentle mastery method. You mentioned this before, energetics, energy. Can we unpack what you mean by energy? Because some might be listening to this and they're feeling it, but they're not 100% sure. They're not 100% clear. Interesting point. And I'll come back to this in just a minute. My wife and my daughter, we were talking about energy last night. But what do you mean by energetics, energy, and how does this relate to the gentle mastery method?
Well, there's two pathways here. There's the pathway that's going to appeal to our left brain listeners, which is quantum mechanics, quantum physics. And if you know anything at all about the way quantum physics has been popularized, part of what that says is everything is energy. So everything exists. You were talking earlier about making choices that then bring about a different reality. All realities exist at the same time in this place called the 0-point field. And it's the observation and the intention behind the observation of that 0-point field that brings reality into existence. So that's the physics version of what energy is. Energy is everything that is seen and unseen. I'm made up of energy. You're made up of energy. Radio waves are energy. Microwaves are energy. And there are many types of energy that we don't even yet know about. But we accept it as being true because science has been able to prove it at some point. Then there's this other energy that we've all experienced, and it's not explainable, but this is the tried and true way of talking about it. You can walk into a room and know exactly how somebody might be feeling. You, without saying anything, you can understand what energy they're sending out. You can tell whether they're happy, sad, mad, glad, whatever is going on with them, without them saying a word, and sometimes without you even seeing them. There's also the experience of, and you've had another guest who actually used this exact example, there's the experience of being seated at a table at a restaurant and just feeling like you're at the wrong table because the energy is wrong. Like maybe you're too close to the door, or maybe you're too close to the kitchen or the bathroom, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be as obvious as that, but you get unsettled. That's another kind of energy. It's actually the same energy, but it just shows up in a different way. When I'm working with energetics, what I'm trying to do is, you talked about the hero's journey. And so part of what happens with the hero's journey is he goes into the underground portion of the pathway. And in that underground portion, there are demons that he has to fight. And oftentimes those demons have surrounded the thing that the hero wants. So it's the image of the dragon surrounding the gold that Carl Jung talked about so much.
Which was personified in The Hobbit.
Yes.
When Bilbo Baggins goes into the cave
And there's Smog, right?
Smog. Yeah, Smog
exactly.
is around the treasure.
And that serpent is the hero's fears. That serpent is energy. It's the hero's fears. And I talked a minute ago I started talking a little bit about embracing in order to release. And with all of these things, with every fear that happens, with every time shame comes up, every time something that's lower on Hawkins' map of consciousness, lower, quote unquote, comes up in the work that I do with my clients, my job is to help them first accept that it's a part of them, then allow that to be part of who they are, and then embrace that difficulty. Because it's through embracing those difficulties, it's through embracing the serpent, if you will, that we get to the gold. And this is more than just a huge metaphor that gets used for movies. This is how life works. This is not how we are taught about life. And when I learned this for myself and began living my life this way, everything about my life has changed. So this is what I want to bring to the people who I work with. And everybody experiences this differently. But what's
Correct.
beautiful about the consciousness signature work is I'm able to pull together these energetic signatures that we are all born with. Everybody's is a little bit different. And that's how I have a map that helps me guide the people who I'm guiding through the caves and up the mountains.
You mentioned about energy, and I'm telling you, I had this conversation with my daughter last night at Monday Mile Meet. We're walking the track, and she was a little bit fussy, if you will, typical teen stuff. And my wife was like, "Can you just talk to her?" And so I just opened up some space, and we had one of the best conversations. And I was like, "Look around you. Everything you see is energy." I was like, if you can learn this now, how vastly different your life will be, to the things that it took me about 40 years to start exploring. And then I said, I'm still a student, I'm still learning, but I'm going to try to accelerate your learning if your heart and your mind are to be open. And I said the way that I would just reference, I was like, energy is just emotion in motion. She kind
Yes.
of connected with that. And I said, it's either ascending or it's descending. And she was like, well, is it good and bad? I was like, no, it just is. And I was like, if we can release the idea of it being good or bad and just it is, I think it just changes the whole context. And so the other thing that I wanted to come back to, because you mentioned the energy and the energetics with the work that you're doing, and you have the map, and you're providing the map, and you are the guide. Um, you mentioned another word that I think is just people are becoming more conscious of, which is consciousness.
Mhm.
Um, it's just once again, I'm being aware and mindful of what I'm hearing from others, and there does seem to be something that I mentioned before with your own story and your own narrative. The shift, there is a shift happening when it comes to just the word consciousness. People are becoming more conscious of that word. How would you define consciousness?
Hmm. Consciousness is the awareness that we are more than we think we are. So again, it's the way I grew up. What was most important in my family life was our our mind, our ability to think, our ability to take care of ourselves using our minds. So I always thought of myself as my mind. I was not, I golfed, but I didn't play any kind of sport that really required me to get in contact with my body. So I didn't
Hmm.
think of myself as being my body. And I was strongly advised not to connect too much with my emotions. That's not how I was raised. But I was
Sure.
raised to um, really exalt the mind.
Hmm.
So I'm going along in my life and I'm in my 20s and I'm in a situation where, okay, I get recommended to see somebody for psychotherapy because of something that's going on in my life. And I was very lucky to get a very good psychotherapist. And it was through working with this woman that I started to detach from the identification of myself just being my mind. And then I had to realize, oh, well, I also have this body, but I'm also not my body. If I'm not my mind and I'm not my body, and of course I was getting in touch with my emotions, I was in psychotherapy, but I'm not my emotions. I can literally have conversations now with my mind, with my emotions, with my body, and understand what's going on with them. Like I'm in a room with, multiple versions of me.
Yeah.
But if I'm having a conversation with them, then there's some aspect of me that is having that conversation that is not them. And you talked about the base of the mountain being the survival level and the fear level. And yes, that maps to Hawkins' map, but it also maps to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so when I think about consciousness, I think of the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy, which is self-actualization. And self-actualization in my mind is, okay, if I'm not my body, my emotions, or my mind, what am I? When you go, and that is the journey that I'm taking people on. Because when you become aware and you know that you're more than you thought you ever were, then you really need to find a place to stand, because you're going to need a safety net as you go through this journey of understanding your consciousness. Does that help?
It does, and I hope that it helps others who are watching or listening to this conversation. And you might be there right now. You might be like, I know I'm more than my body. I know I'm more than my mind. I know I'm more than my emotion. And there's something else. And it's just I think this is such a timely conversation for so many, and perhaps they're even scared to have the conversation with themselves,
Of course.
to even open this up. And so I know that this wisdom will continue to reverberate, and help others even beyond our initial conversation here. I want to come back to who it is that you're working with, and guiding on these journeys, because you're very specific
Mm.
communicating who you are helping. Um, and it's not everyone.
No.
It's very, very specific, which, if we think about amplifying your voice, or anyone's voice for that matter, it's who is it that you're helping? And when someone tells me, "Well, I want to help everyone," well, no, can't. I've been told that myself. As much as we want to,
Yeah.
we're going to drain ourselves by doing so. And even you were referencing that in some of the perspective you shared in the Loom video in the document. Now, who is it that you're helping? If they're watching or listening to this, you are connecting and resonating.
Yeah. My job is to help people who are highly resourced, but don't have a resource for moving through this territory. So I think of them as high achieving seekers. My typical client is someone who has done extremely well financially, so much so that they are leaving a financial legacy, but who simultaneously is concerned about the world that we are living in, the way that the systems in our world are currently falling apart, the things that all of us believe that we could probably rely on for the rest of our lives, our children's lives, our grandchildren's lives, don't seem to be reliable anymore. And so these people are motivated very personally to help make the world a better place for the future. And they want to unlock the part of them that connects to their consciousness, because that's where this personal legacy that is greater than any kind of financial legacy that you can leave behind, that's where that personal legacy lives. And when I work with them and they unlock their personal legacy, it not only benefits their immediate sphere of people, but it benefits humanity as a whole. So in that way, my job is to help everyone by helping the right single individuals.
So this is interesting, and I can't recall when we have talked before if I've shared this with you. Have I told you anything? So obviously, Level Up Business is the primary focus, but to me, that is the first level of my work.
Mm-hmm.
Have I told you about the second level, which is Level Up Legacy?
No.
Okay. So when you just shared what you shared about they've achieved financial success, um, they have financial assets to pass down. Um, so level up legacy is, I would say, even more personal than the level up business work. And we just have recently signed our first level up legacy client. It is a high net worth family that has had financial success, but they also are now wanting to pass down not just their financial capital, but their human capital,
Hmm.
their wisdom, their stories, their values to the next generation, being their kids, which now has kids to the grandkids, but then also the grandkids' kids. So now you're talking about great grandkids, and they're wanting to pass this down through video that becomes a book,
Mm, beautiful.
because that's the stories that have led them to this point. Because I think about, for example, some of my past work in financial services, how much we lose because we don't pass down the human capital. We don't have the perspective of what it took to reach this point, and as a result, that transfer of wealth. And we know that we have a big transfer of wealth coming up as we're moving from the baby boomers to Gen X, millennials, etc. But then what is at risk? Is it just the financial capital at risk of making it to the next generation? Or is it the human capital, the story and the wisdom that, because you're 67,
Yes, sir.
I'm 44. Like, I look at myself as this bridge between before the internet and after the internet. And now we're entering this whole new age of AI. And it's like, yeah, these are great capabilities, but we also risk losing our humanity along the way. So it's just interesting when you're talking about who your ideal client is. That's kind of like my next level of for level up, which is level up legacy, because these would be stories that would probably never see the light of day outside of a family. But they would be tied to a trust, in a way that, if you want to get access to the trust, well, you're going to have to read the book, watch the videos, and maybe even take a test so that you have respect, or at least the understanding
Yeah.
of what it took to create this wealth.
Yeah. It's a
That's just,
values based legacy, right? So our personal values make such a difference in how our reality gets shaped.
Mhm.
And that's what I'm hearing you say, is that level up legacy is an opportunity to pass down those hard earned, hard won, fought for values
Yeah,
along with the financial value. I mean, it's all we're talking about different kinds of wealth here.
correct.
There's that financial wealth, but then there's also that wealth of human knowledge and values and experience. But the what I see as being the real exciting opportunity there is that when those values get passed along, that means that the people who are inheriting both the money and the values are going to be able to continue to create a new reality that's going to be better for themselves and their contemporaries, right? That's what this is about as we shift from a world that is just trying to survive into a world of fully actualized conscious beings who are all here as a collective to help each other
Well,
without
and
the requirements of systems and governments and things like that that are not very useful anymore.
and you bring that point up as we start to wrap up our conversation here. And thank you for the perspective and the wisdom that you have shared. I really am so grateful. And I look forward to amplifying this, to getting this out to the ears, so that people can see you, know you, hear you, that need to hear you, that can value from your guideship. Because you talk about this, and that's just funny that we're wrapping up with this, but what you shared with me, which is the great perturbation.
Yeah.
That was a big word for me. I'm not gonna lie.
It stops everybody in their tracks. That's one of the reasons why I use it. And I got it from Robert Kiyosaki.
What's what do you mean by that? Because we've touched on it, but now you've given it a name. When it comes to the thing I think that has been underlying our entire conversation that we've all been feeling specifically since 2020, which
Yeah.
is the shift.
Yeah.
What
So,
is the great distribution?
yeah, the great perturbation, and to define the
Exactly.
word,
Can't even say it
yeah,
properly.
that's okay. It's, as people have been told not to perturbate all their lives. So, but perturbation is actually a term that comes from physics. And it basically, my understanding of it is it means any time that an organism, so it can be a human, it can be an organization, it can be a business, it can be a country, has more energy flowing into it than the organism has the capacity to handle, there are two options. One is for the organism to shut down, basically die, because it's getting so much energy put into it. The other one is for that organism to reorganize and expand their capacity and be able to move forward with more energy coming into them, right? So again, you think about this from a physics point of view. You've got some mass of cells, and energies are being put into these cells, and the cells are either going to die or they're going to mutate in a positive way. This, in my mind, is what's happening in the world today. So there is so much, especially since 2020, there is so much new energy being introduced into the world. Anybody who is working currently with anybody in their 20s understands that workers in their 20s are not putting up with anybody's shit. And that is a different kind of energy that has ever been put into the work world before. That's only one example of what's going on. But what we see is systems, both man-made systems and natural systems like the ecological systems, falling apart at a more rapid rate than they ever have before. And it throws us into panic. But the reality of perturbation is we can either die or we can reorganize in a healthier, more capable way. And that's the shift that's going on. We're moving from relying on systems that are decaying and declining to relying on ourselves and each other as conscious individuals in conscious community to take care of ourselves and our planet.
All of this comes together full circle, and it is your work and how it is tied to legacy, your legacy, but also helping others to understand, find, align with their legacy. You say legacy isn't built like a business. And so a lot of the people you work with have done just that. They've built the business, they've done the thing. What do you mean legacy isn't built like this?
Business, in my view, is taking an idea and then creating physical reality around that idea. Legacy is coming from consciousness, conscious energy. It's not a mindful process from an idea. It is from a feeling. It is from an emotion. It is from a inner knowing. It's from things that you can't necessarily name. And then it is a journey that you take on your own to learn how to create it out of nothing. as opposed to using existing elements to cobble together something externally. This is internally built.
And I know this is the Level Up Business podcast, and a lot of entrepreneurs listen to this podcast. But when you talk about taking something from nothing, that is the entrepreneurial way to create.
Yeah.
So if there is someone, and you talk about this journey, we've been talking about this journey together. If there is someone who has been watching, listening, they want to connect with you, continue the conversation that we've started here today. Maybe even they're curious about the journey that they could take to understand and learn what their conscious signature is through the Gentle Mastery method. What is the best way for them to reach out and connect, say hello to you?
The two easiest ways, one is through my website, gentlemasterymethod.com, which is really all about this legacy activation work, and you can contact me through there. The other way is I'm on LinkedIn at Dave Hime, and that's a very simple way to just contact me that way.
Well, here's what you should do next. Connect with Dave, learn with Dave, level up together, and grow with Dave. Dave, thank you so much for the wisdom that you've shared today.
It has been my honor to be here, JR. We have so much in common. Can't wait to hear more about Level Up Legacy and find out how I can help you with that work.
I really appreciate that. Hey, it's JR. Before we wrap up, I have one more question for you. Are you a visionary entrepreneur who wants to elevate your brand and expand your influence to increase your impact? If this is you, you're the reason we're on a mission to amplify the voices of visionary entrepreneurs by unlocking their wisdom, sharing their stories, and publishing their books. So, when you are ready to level up your business and your life, send me a text to 832-240-1922. That's because I want to teach you to amplify your voice so that your mission and message are seen, known, and heard by those who need your help the most.